Hello and good morning. Hi, Danie. It's so nice to have you
Hi.
on the call. Still waiting for people to join. We've got a really exciting topic today that seemed very timely when I look at the chat in the toddler group this morning, because there was a
Yeah.
lot of discussion on power struggles with the kids.
Yes.
And I think the toddlers is the main age. You will yeah, like explain that a little bit more. But yeah, it's always tough. So I'd love to learn about today about behavior, power struggles, how to do this in a more sensible and respectful way as well. So we've invited Danielle Gitthens. She's a child behavior specialist, and so we're going to learn from her today. Thank you for everybody who has joined. Danie, can you please introduce yourself, and then we can switch to share your presentation as well.
Absolutely. So my name is Danielle Gitthens. I am a child behavior specialist. I'm also a parenting specialist. And I've been in the field of child behavior for well over 20 years. I have a
Wow.
master's degree in psychology. Yeah, it's been a long time. I did the math. I'm like, oh, yeah, I am that old. Okay.
Because I know
Um,
you from when you had your first
I
child, and
know.
I had no idea that this was your passion before having children, even.
Yeah, yeah. So my whole career has been in child development,
Amazing.
and I've worked with neurodivergent kids, neurotypical kids. Actually, pre-COVID, I had quite a few of adopted families that I was working with. So it was really interesting. I'm also the only certified connected parenting practitioner in all of Southeast Asia.
Wow.
So my work blends neuroscience, behavior science, and practical strategies to help empower parents to not only better understand their kids, but to build stronger connections and to feel more confident in navigating everyday challenges. Because let's face it, parenting is one of the most amazing and most stressful jobs we have.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Amazing. That's great. I love having you on the call this morning. I'm sure we'll learn
Thank
a lot.
you. So let me open up my deck. Okay, bear with me. I apologize to anyone on the call or watching later. I'm just getting over being sick, so my brain's a little bit not at its best right now.
Okay, I'm sure you'll do fine.
Okay,
And parents on the call, if you want to ask any questions, put them in the chat, and I'll bring them up when it's appropriate.
absolutely. Okay, so can you see the deck okay?
Yeah, perfect.
The right one? Okay.
Mhm.
Just making sure. Okay, so we talked about me, enough about that. Let's jump ahead. All right. So, why child neurology, right? I think one of the biggest ironies, and I think most parents can agree, is that through so many aspects of our lives, we are required to prove some level of competency to level up, right? To be given more access to more responsibility. You want to own a home, great. You have to prove that you're financially responsible and stable. You want to drive a car, you have to pass a basic road safety test. You want to get that promotion, you've got to study for that certificate and pass it for that certification. And yet, when it comes to arguably the most important job on the planet, which is raising tiny humans, we're
Mhm.
just kind of shown the door and saying,
Yeah.
good luck.
No
you know,
manual. No
no
manual.
manual, no training, just see ya, hope everything's good, come back if there's any critical issues, right?
Mm.
So And I think that, it's really frustrating. Sorry, I need to see a face. Okay. For parents and overwhelming as well. And so what do, right? We do what any normal person would do, I think, and we talk to our parents or we talk to our friends that we feel like kind of have it together. Um, we go to research and we Google and we go to TikTok and Instagram and we see all these people telling us what to do. But the problem is that we typically rely on whatever we find, and that's not necessarily relevant to our situation. Um, and when we find stuff on social media, the downside of that is that one, there's a ton of information out there. There's so much information out there that it's really difficult to sort through what you need. The other part of that is that, as we all know, social media is driven by algorithms. It's not driven by accuracy. It's by who's popular today, what's getting attention, who's viral. And again, it may not be what you need. So I think when I look at what's going on out there, I see all of this stuff and all of this noise, right? It's just so much. Um, but what if we could cut through the noise? What if we could make it simple and actionable and relevant? And I think that's the key that's missing for a lot of parents and a lot of families is making it relevant to your situation. So instead of drowning in advice, what if we started by understanding how our kids' brains work, just the basic biology of what's going on inside their heads and what's happening in those tricky moments? What's driving their behavior? How can we repair and reconnect in a way that's actually supporting their development? So today we're going to focus on the first part. And the first part is really understanding your kiddo's brain and what's going on. Um, Now, their brains are constantly growing, right? They're constantly growing. So there's a lot to cover, and we're not going to get into everything today. There's literally not enough time. But we are going to focus on just understanding the beginnings of brain development and where your littles are kind of at. Because when you understand where the brain is at, you can start decoding behavior and fostering growth.
Mhm.
So, next, why does it matter? When we know what's going on under the behavior, we can stop jumping to punishment and start building the skills our child is missing. We can help reframe our expectations. And with that, it builds compassion and practical strategies. So, what might look like defiance, often, especially in littles, is a developmental thing. It's a developmental milestone, it's a developmental issue, not necessarily outward defiance. So there's a big myth that, you hear this a lot. Oh, they should just behave. And oh my goodness, especially from, my parents' generation, the grandparents are always, they should know better. They should. But the thing is, right, it's very different to know what something is and being able to do it consistently. And they're not the same thing. And it takes practice, and the brain has to be ready. Sorry, I lost it. Okay. So, what we're going to start talking about is the brain. And when we go into looking at what our kids are doing, what I want you to stop and teach yourself to do is take a pause. And before reacting, ask yourself, is this skill still developing? And we're going to go over those skills today. So, the first part we're going to talk about is the brain. Now, for anyone out there that has a degree in biology or medical profession, I'd have to preface this section with explaining that this is in a very watered down version of what is happening in the brain. Okay, there's a lot to cover in the brain, and we're not going to flood you with all of that stuff. We're just going to keep it simple so that you understand the two major players. The first is the amygdala. So this is, a small but mighty. I want you to think of, I'm going to date myself here, Mighty Mouse. I don't know if anybody out there remembers that cartoon, or better yet, the genie in Aladdin. It's, a little bit of living space, but infinite power. The amygdala is a very small part in our brains, but it's incredibly powerful. And it's the first part of their brain to develop, or one of the first. So this is where big feelings live. So when you think about this part of the brain and the amygdala, I want you to remember that this is the first part, and it's big feelings, right? So this is your brain's emotional fire alarm. It detects threats and emotions like fear and anger and excitement, and it reacts quickly to keep us safe. But this part of the brain is very dumb. There's no thinking involved. It just reacts, it just takes over. And when it takes over, it explodes, which is why, that cup spilling, or not having the right color, or the leaf is bent, or whatever it is, seems so tragic to your child, because for them, it is. For them, they had, my daughter did this one day. She had the perfect strawberry. No one was allowed to touch it. She wanted to keep it forever. And then obviously it started to decompose, and lose its shape. And that was just horrible for her. There's a worst thing that could happen that day. And these feelings are very real, because the amygdala is in overdrive and it's taking over everything. The second part of this is the prefrontal cortex. Now, if you haven't heard from the prefrontal cortex and the role it plays, you're probably living under a rock, because I think every person on the planet that does anything to do with child development has been touting the prefrontal cortex for the last 10 years or so. It's been everywhere, but no one's really talking about what the heck it does and why it matters, right? Oh, the brain's not developed. The brain's not developed. Okay, great. Well, what does that mean in real life? So the prefrontal cortex, I want you to think of it as the big thinking brain, the control center, right? This is one of the last parts of the brain to develop. And this is hugely important because the job of the prefrontal cortex, of the control center, of the big thinking brain, is to help with so many things and so many issues and behaviors that we see in our children, like problem solving, decision making, rational thought,
Mhm.
calming down those big emotions. It helps with self regulation, understanding consequences, and the list goes on and on and on. But this is developing constantly. So, this is one of the reasons why children struggle with impulse control and needing help learning how to calm down when emotions run high because they don't have access to a fully developed control center. So, how they work together, there's a balance between the two. Again, the amygdala, the emotional hub of the brain, where big feelings live, and the control center, which is the prefrontal cortex, where logic and reasoning live. And they do two very separate things, and they can feel very far apart when our kids are overreacting. So the takeaway from just understanding the brain doesn't matter if you remember the amygdala or the prefrontal cortex. Just remember there's two pieces that we're really focusing on when we're talking about little kids and kids in general, and also adults sometimes, is that you've got your big feeling center and you've got your control center. And in kiddos, the feelings lead and your logic is always going to lag behind.
And by when do we expect the prefrontal cortex to have fully matured?
So the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed into our mid 20s to late 20s. So and some even argue about 30s, which makes a lot of sense. And you see a lot of things going on in our teenage years that also where the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed in judgment, in understanding long-term consequences, um, things like this, like these reacting without thinking, acting without thinking, doing something that dangerous because it seems fun, but again, not thinking about
Yeah.
potential long-term consequences or your effect on other people. A lot of times you see this with older kids where they'll say something nasty or hurtful and then drop it, right? And then they don't kind of revisit it again. And why is that? Well, they're not thinking about your perspective versus their perspective and things like that. So this is, again, the brain is very complicated, just a very simple understanding for the purpose of our discussion that you understand there's two different parts going on that are driving your child. Okay, so why does this matter? This matters because as parents, we often over and underestimate what our children are capable of. And we do this all the time. I myself do this with my own kids, and I've been in this field for over 20 years. So no one is immune to this.
Yeah.
And when we do this, when we hold our children to an expectation that they are not yet ready for, especially developmentally, it causes a lot of frustration on our part because we get angry. Why can't you just? Well, because they literally can't. And the child gets super stressed and frustrated because they can't. They're not ready to do whatever that thing is. So when we can realign our expectations, we come into more harmony in our home, in our in our environment. Sorry, give me one second.
Take your time.
I just got my voice back. I'm a mess. Okay. And one of the things that I think parents need to understand is that many of the key skills that we are expecting of them from an early age don't actually even develop until 4 to 6 or even 11. And so this is where you'll start to see a big disconnect. So we need to understand what's going on because it helps us build strategies for growth and create opportunities to strengthen self-regulation, logic, reasoning, problem solving, all the areas that our kids struggle with and that we kind of struggle to accept that they're struggling with, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into the three main topics that I constantly see as areas of frustration for parents. And we're going to discuss impulse control first, logical thinking, and then emotional regulation. So impulse control. Okay. We all have impulse control issues. Most adults have some form of impulse control issues. And what is impulse control? It's the ability to stop yourself from doing something you know you're not supposed to do. right? And this is probably one of the most misunderstood behaviors and with misaligned expectations that I come across with parents, especially parents of young kids, but even going into preteens, teens, all of it. So, for example, well, okay, Johanna, maybe you know at what age do you think kiddos should be able to share and wait and take their turn?
Oh my God.
If you had to take a guess, just off the fly.
6 years. I don't know.
Okay.
Idea.
Okay, maybe not that far.
It's definitely not. I mean, a toddler, I wouldn't expect.
I warned you. I warned you with the.
Sorry, I've also
Okay.
got the most horrible drilling going on behind me, so I'm
Oh
going
no.
to
No, no.
stop my audio
I
for.
don't hear any drilling on my end. So, okay. So a lot of parents think that by around 2 to 3, their kids should be able to share or wait. Um, and it's just not possible. So, because the prefrontal cortex, so one thing you have to understand about the prefrontal cortex is all of our higher order thinking is up here, right? And this is massively developing. It is under so much construction when after we're born that there's parts of the brain that just, for all intents and purposes, doesn't exist. And the area of the brain that controls and is responsible for inhibition and impulse control isn't there until 4. So it's not about telling your child 8,000 times not to do something they can't do. The Because they literally can't do it because the area of their brain that they are trying to access to tell them, oh, stop, stop, you're not supposed to do that. It's not around. It's not physically present until about 3 to 4. And in some kids, the onset is later. And my child, my youngest, the onset wasn't until about 5. So you see this all the time, right? You see parents, especially of young kids, new parents, tired, you're exhausted, you go out to dinner and the kids bang, 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 bang with the spoon or dropping the cup over and over and over again. And the dad or the mom is getting frustrated. I told you to stop. I told you to stop. Oh, hold on. My kids are homesick today. So, and there's drama. So apologize if you hear screaming on my end, drilling on yours, screaming on mine. Okay, back on track. Sorry, squirrel. Okay, so with um with that, what happens is, they're getting frustrated. Don't throw the spoon. I've told you not to do that. I've told you to drop this. I've told you not to do this. And they're getting more frustrated as a parent, and the child is getting frustrated because they don't know what to do because they can't. So, sorry, I'm a little bit distracted at the moment. I've got knocking going on. So one of the things what this would be like is, let's say your arm is tied behind your back. You're wrapped up, your arm's tied behind your back, and you're getting yelled at to wave your hand. Wave your hand. Say hello. I told you to wave your hand. Why aren't you waving your hand? And now I'm giving you a consequence because I'm angry, right? But you can't wave your hand, can you? Because it's tied up. You have no access. And so that's what's happening with our young kids when we're telling them to do something or not do something, and they're not following through. They're not listening, as we would say, they're not listening, right? But they're listening. They just literally can't do it because that part of the brain is not online. So it's kind of funny if you're paying attention and you have small kids, when this part of the brain comes online, it's very obvious if you're paying attention. Because what happens is your child will do something they know they're not supposed to do. And then they usually have one of two responses. They freeze. It's kind of like an oh shit moment, or they cry. And I've had both. Both my kids reacted exactly differently. One, she froze and she's like realized she did something that she knew she wasn't supposed to do and caught it. And so that moment of that kind of like light bulb goes off in your kid's brain. That's the moment that we can start working on impulse control and start strengthening that skill. And I think the key thing here too is to realize that impulse control is constantly evolving. It's constantly developing. It does not just, oh, the light bulb went on. I know that they got it, and now I should expect them to always, be able to demonstrate this. No, it's the skill. It's going to come. It's going to go. It's going to come. It's going to go. Because just because that part of the brain is developing and now kind of open, Doesn't mean it's, you know, in expert mode. It doesn't mean it's open all the time. And if you think about your own life, how many times have you grabbed a hot pan just
Yeah.
out of impulse? Not so many times. How many times have you, I know this one I'm horrible at, um, opening the oven and like forgetting the oven mitt, grabbing, like, what am I doing? Right. So we've all had these moments, even as fully functioning adults, if there is such a thing, where our brains just kind of short wire and we lose access to our inhibition and our impulsivity. So up to, I would say, sorry, again, please excuse me, my brain is still a bit foggy from being sick. Up until I would say age 7, it's incredibly unrealistic to expect your child to do something simply because you told them to do it. It is not going to happen. These kind of arguments happen in homes all the time. They happen in my home all the time. You know, I told you to 5 down 16 times. No, telling is not enough. We have to get up. We've got to help them. Um, and a lot of times it's not because they're willfully ignoring you. Now, when they get older and we're getting into preteens and that brain is a little bit more online, now we can have a conversation about defiance. But up to age 7, check in, you know, is it impulse or is it maybe a developmental thing? Sorry, is it impulse or is it, yep, I lost my train of thought. Apologies. Is it an impulse or is it intent? There we go. That's what I was looking for. So the difference would be you have a bunch of French fries on the table, you're having a burger and French fries, and you know, your kid sits down, you say, okay, you know, no French fries, you eat your burger first, then your French fries, and it's sitting in front of the kid, right? And the kid's eating the burger, and all of a sudden he grabs a French fry and eats it. Versus him watching you, waits till you leave, then shoves a bunch of French fries in their mouth. That's intent, as opposed to just walking by, seeing those French fries, or you know, being tempted and just grabbing it and not thinking. So that's what you want to look for when they're doing something, you know, again, that they're not supposed to do. They know they're not supposed to do. Okay. Turn taking usually develops between 3 to 5, and it takes practice. So this is something that is a sticky point for me. Um, I have a really big pet peeve, and that revolves around sharing. Um, you know, we hear this song how many times a day in every school, I think, sharing is caring, and all of these. This drives me absolutely nuts because is sharing really caring? What does sharing teach our kids? And yes, I know some people argue it's semantics, but I don't think it is, because we're dealing with kiddos that don't have impulse control, that are not able to wait successfully at all, if, you know, and if they can, maybe like a few seconds. And when we say share, what happens when we share? Little, you know, I have my toy and I love my toy and I'm playing, and someone comes along and says, okay, you have to share. And they take the toy and they give it to Johnny. Well, what has that just taught me? It's taught me that I can lose something that I like simply because somebody else wants it. It teaches Johnny that he doesn't have to wait. He wants it, he gets it. As opposed to telling them to take turns, where when we say take turns, we also act differently, right? We say, okay, when you finish or you have 2 more minutes, then it's Johnny's turn. Now you're putting in some impulsivity and like some practice here with inhibition, where you're teaching your kiddo that there's a timeline, right? And they get to play with it. Now, again, a warning, all done. It's time for Johnny's turn. So you don't just get it taken away right away. You get to finish playing with it, and then you have to give it up, and that's a transition. Then Johnny learns that he has to wait. He can't just snatch. He can't just grab. He can't just get it because he wants it in that immediate moment. And so when I talk about sharing and waiting and things like that, I try to emphasize taking turns over sharing for this exact reason. Some other things you can do to help impulse control and strengthen it. Again, you need to make sure you're online, like that part of the brain is online. But playing games like Simon Says, Freeze Dance, anything that's like anticipatory can be really helpful in strengthening that center. Um, and again, you know, practice taking turns. There was a great video that was done, but I can't think of it right now. where they put like a marshmallow in front of the kiddos. And the researcher said, okay, I'm gonna leave this marshmallow here. Don't eat it, leave it there, and we can share it when we get back. And the researcher leaves the room for all of like maybe 5 minutes. You see the kids, they're like staring at it and they're really trying, like they really want this marshmallow or whatever the candy was. And some of the kids were really good and they held out, right? And then if they did, the facilitator would come back in and then they would get two marshmallows. And then some of the other kids, they just couldn't do it. They just stuffing it in their face. And the facilitator comes back in and they're like, what happened to the marshmallow? Oh, they got a mouthful and she stuffed out. So these kind of fun, playful ways are fantastic ways to build that skill of waiting, of taking turns, and strengthen that impulsivity, the ability to control the impulsivity. All right, we're going to move on to logical thinking. Logical thinking is the ability to problem solve, predict outcomes, and connect actions to consequences. So it's first, I need to blank before I can blank. This begins around age 4. And you see this because you'll see there's a lot of love of the cause and effect toys, but this is where they start to understand the cause and effect toy. I hit the button and the lights pop up, right? Excuse me. For logical thinking in young kiddos, it's important to realize that it's all about trial and error. So think about a kiddo putting a puzzle together. When you're talking about the itty bitties and you've got the big chunky puzzles and the big round peg and the big round hole, they're often kind of just like smashing it, right? Like, how do I get this to fit in here? And then eventually they learn that it fits through the circle container or shape. Then you move on and they graduate to a proper puzzle with like shapes and they have to fit together um, but they don't attack it with any type of strategy, right? And again, it's trial and error. They just kind of smash the pieces together and don't quite understand why it's not coming together and fitting perfectly. Whereas an adult or someone with kind of more developed strategy will maybe build the outline first, right? They'll find all the flat edges, or they'll build the corners first, or they'll sort things into different colors and they start finding the pattern within and approaching it from kind of a systematic way. So this is where that, incomplete or incorrect logic is happening with the children, and it grows. It goes up and down. Sometimes you're going to have like this moment of like these aha moments, and you see those like the kids say the darndest things videos because they're spot on. But then most of the time, especially when they're little, it's a little bit okay. I can kind of see how you got there, but not quite. So when we look at older kids, we also want to remember that they're still thinking very black and white. And what often seems like stubbornness is them just trying to work through a very limited kind of cause and effect thinking. So ways you can encourage this is starting with, simple first we blank, then we blank, walking them through it to help guide transitions without yelling, ideally. So the other part is encourage problem solving. It's so easy for us to do everything for our kids because it's faster. Let's be honest, we're busy, we're stressed, we're tired, we just want to get it done. But when we can, trying to pull back and help guide them through the problem solving. And again, we're building those neural pathways or strengthening that ability in them to be able to do this on their own. Okay, regulating emotions. This is a big, big, big one. So regulating emotions, this begins around 3.5 to 4. And like with everything else, it grows with experience. This is arguably what I have seen, probably one of the most difficult struggles in kids, but also adults. And there's a really big reason, potentially obvious reason why that we discussed previously. So to be able to regulate your own emotions, it requires 2 key developmental skills. The first is being able to identify your emotion at all, understanding how you feel. The second is impulse control, choosing how to respond. So if you don't have either of those, And if you don't have either of those, one, it's nearly impossible. Two, if you don't have both of them working together, you're not going to be able to self-regulate. And this is a hard part, I think, for parents. It's a hard part for kids. Um, there's a lot of, oh, they should, just calm down. They need to use their words. We're famous, I think, as parents, even teachers are famous for saying, use your words. And this is actually makes it worse. So when we talked about the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, we discussed how we've got a big feeling brain, right? Tiny but mighty, big feeling brain, and we've got the control center. And Dr. Daniel Siegel does an amazing job with this analogy, so I'm going to borrow it for this presentation, where he calls it the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain. Now, these two parts of your brain are connected by a pathway, and that pathway is quite narrow and quite small. So what happens is when your downstairs brain, your big emotion brain, lives in chaos and stress and fear and anger, and it's kind of blown up the whole downstairs, right? It also blows up that bridge, that stairwell to the upstairs brain. And what's upstairs? The control center. And what happens in the control center? All of your thinking, all of your understanding, your ability to calm yourself down, and your ability to communicate. So one of the things that makes this so difficult for kiddos is when they're dysregulated, we often get dysregulated. And then we respond with demanding language. And this is awful. It's probably one of the worst things you can do in this point in time, because language is a cognitive task, not an automatic one. What does that mean? It means that, let's say, okay, so you're driving a car, right? I'm assuming most people out there know how to drive a car or have driven a car at some point in time. But imagine driving a car, driving home from work, and you got the music on, and you're just kind of decompressing, and you're singing at the top of your lungs, and all of a sudden you pull into your driveway or the car park, and you're like, what? How did I get here so fast? Like, I don't remember driving home. That's because that skill has been built over time, and it's automatic. Now, imagine when you travel and you have to drive on the opposite side of the road that you're used to. What happens? We all kind of freeze up. We get a little bit tense. The music goes down or off. We've got both hands on the wheels. Our mirrors are perfectly aligned, and we're focused on driving, right? We're telling the kids to be quiet. You're telling your partner, don't talk to me. You've got to really hone in and focus, because now driving has become a cognitive task. And then what happens? Your kids start screaming. You've got your sat nav telling you giving you directions. You've got your partner chatting in your ear, and you're getting more and more and more stressed because you're trying not to crash the car and stay on the right side of the road. This is what's happening to our kiddos when we are demanding they tell us what's wrong. They can't. They literally can't access language when they're upset, because they have no pathway. They've got no bridge to the upper control center to communicate, to calm themselves down. So this is where us keeping it together, and believe me, I know it's hard. If any parent, every parent knows it's hard, helps them to keep it together. Sorry. Okay, so when the emotional brain is activated, language goes offline, does not exist. Stop telling your kids to communicate when they're stressed out. And it's not easy. I still do it. I know better, and I still do it because I get frustrated, right? What's wrong? Talk to me. Use your words. And I have to catch myself in my own moments with my kids and be like, stop it, walk away, take a breath, come back, calm. Because that's what's going to help them calm down faster, is me being able to regulate myself, so then I can wait through the mess with them. So using calm rhythmic language, let's take an exhale. I specifically say exhale here for a reason, because when we inhale, it sets our kind of fight or flight response into gear. When we start with an exhale, it automatically kind of brings our nervous system down a bit. So instead of starting with the inhale, try exhaling, and exhaling in front of your kids too. So emotional regulation is a big passion part of mine in my fields that I do. And so I could go on forever with this stuff, but one of the biggest things that you can do is regulate yourself, and it is not easy. So walk away. It's okay. As long as your child is not hurting themselves or anyone else, walk away, turn around, take a breath. For me, one of my own personal biggest triggers is noise. And what helps me is when my kids start, I'll put earplugs in. I have those little, like, I don't know what they're called, loop ears. You can hear them. I can still hear them, but it dulls it enough that I'm not so reactive. So figure out what your triggers are, and then try to work with yourself a bit to help stay calmer in those situations. For me, the earplugs just take enough edge off that I'm not reactive. So you're going to use calm language. You're going to start with an exhale. Show your kiddos you exhaling. Okay, this is really tough, right? It's okay. You don't have to be perfect. None of us are. And your kids can see that, and they need to see that, because when you model how to calm yourself down, they learn how to calm themselves down. And you want to validate emotions. This is a really, really big one. Um, I think I've seen so many parenting guides and books and strategies and things that say, oh, um, tell them how they're feeling. Like, oh, you're upset. Yeah, of course. They know they're upset, right? You don't have to label that for them. I mean, think about when you're angry and you're upset and your partner comes up to you and says, oh, you just need to calm down. Really? Does that ever help anyone in the history of anyone ever being upset? It doesn't. So why do we think that's going to work with our kids? Um, when I say validate emotion, it doesn't mean always labeling their emotions. But you can do it in a way that says, oh, this is really frustrating. Not you're frustrated. They are. They know that they're upset, right? But by mirroring what they're feeling and just that, like, oh, this is awful. This is really upsetting. This is really frustrating. I can feel your anger. Um, this is really helpful for them because, again, emotional regulation relies on understanding their emotion, being able to communicate and access that prefrontal cortex and calm themselves down. So we want to practice that for them. Another thing that's really great, especially with littles, which I didn't put on here, but is reading through pictures, learning through books, and not even reading the story, but going through as your kids get a little bit older, going through and showing, like, oh, I wonder how they're feeling, right? Or she looks really upset. I wonder what's going on. And giving them situational context based on imagery to help them kind of build a repertoire in their brain of things that they can pull from later. So the biggest takeaway here is remember, 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 children lose language when they are upset. They literally cannot access that control center. So obviously it's easier to hit, to grab, to scream, to throw things than it is for them to communicate. This is often in the little bit older kids, even 4, 5, 6 for sure, where you start hearing the I hate you. I hate you. You're the worst mommy ever. It's because they're angry, right? They're so angry, but they don't have the language to say that they're angry. So when they say, I hate you, they're not really saying they hate you. What they're saying is, I'm mad, I'm really mad, I'm really disappointed, or I'm really sad. A lot of kids translate sadness as anger. Um, and so these are times where, as much as it feels like, ugh, well, fine then, it's really recognizing that, like, okay, their big feeling brain is just in overdrive, and I need to help them calm down. And sometimes it's just waiting. Sometimes it's not even talking to them. It's just sitting down, waiting. And you know your kid. Trust yourself. You know your kid. You can see the moment they kind of start to kind of calm down a little bit. And that's why being regulated yourself is so important. That's why breathing for yourself is so important. By walking away for a minute, again, make sure your kid's safe. Walking away for a minute, taking that breath and coming back is so important, because when you're present and not in your own amygdala, you can see the shift. You can see, and you can hear it. You can hear that, like, anger and panicky and just, to that kind of, like, drops an octave, right? Or you can kind of see their body soften a bit. That's when you can come in a little bit calmer and use soft words and kind of start lowering it down to guide them out of it. So that is kind of tiptoeing into brain development. Um, And I think the biggest, takeaway is understanding that your child's brain is dictating a lot of what we think is, behavior issues. Especially when we're talking about littles, their brain is growing so much and so fast that when we stop punishing and start parenting and align our expectations with what's going on in their brain, we have a better bond, we have a better understanding. Stressors come down in the house when we know that our kids are not ignoring us and refusing to listen, but that they just don't have inhibition yet. Um, it helps take a bit of the stress off of us as well. And when we're a little less stressed, our kids are a little less stressed. So I hope you found some of that helpful. I think it was a lot of information. Again, I apologize for my brain being a bit scattered today. I've been sick for quite a few days. If you have any questions or would like personalized support or tailored plans, you can contact me either through WhatsApp or at my website. Um, I'm, I'm here. I'm in Singapore. I'm always around, and I also do international calls as well. So
Thank you,
that's
Danie.
all there is. You're welcome.
I apologize for the noise behind, like around me. We've got renovations going on apparently. Parents on the call, this is your chance. I hope you're open to still answer some questions directly. Maybe there's someone in the group who would like to share maybe a scenario or stuff that they're struggling with at the moment.
Yeah.
Do let us know. You can pop it in the chat or you can unmute yourself as well. This is, really helpful. I think it's so helpful to just take a step back and say, is my baby ready? Is my child ready for this? Are they
Yeah.
actually able to access, like you say, their language, their emotions, that part of their brain in that particular moment? And we often expect a little bit too much from them, I think.
Mhm.
Mummies, let us know if you have any questions. So can you hear it or is it just
I
me?
don't hear it on my end.
Wow, so loud. Okay, we got a lot of people saying thank you. Thank you. This is
You're
helpful.
welcome.
Yeah. Let's see if somebody pops up still. Not sure this is a question for this group, but is there any advice when the child wants to sleep in your bed and you don't want them to?
Oh man. Okay. So
Go.
this one,
Us-
there's a at 4 years old. Yeah. Okay. If it makes you feel any better, my eldest did not stop sleeping in my own bed until she was about 7. So she would try and she would go to her room. We actually got her successfully sleeping in her own bed, and then her sister was born. And then she felt like I'm the only one all by myself, right? The dogs are in mommy's in mommy's room, my sister's in mommy's room. So, uh, you know, um, but yes, there are definitely strategies that you can do to help your child sleep in their own bed. What I would suggest is, oh my goodness, they've been sick together for way too long. And if anyone out there has more than one, you know what that's like.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to be surprised if someone's not bleeding when I walk out of this room. Sorry. They're okay, I promise, if you can hear screaming in the background. Okay, back on focus. Yes, there are a ton of strategies that you can do to encourage your child to sleep through the night in their own bed. And I think the root though is figuring out why they're sleeping in your own bed. Sometimes it's as simple as your comfort, mommy's safe. There's no safer place for a child than between mommy and daddy, or mommy and daddy, whoever, their parents, right? There's no safer place in the world for them. And so that is something that if it's simply a matter of, I feel safe and confident and comfortable here, then I would focus on connection. I would focus on it's called limbic bonding, where you really connect on a very basic but deep level. This is something I coach parents on all the time. It's kind of a cornerstone to then going into more maladaptive behaviors. If it's simply the connection that I feel safe when I'm with mommy and daddy, then you build the connection so that they have that safety. If it's more than that, are there fears involved? And, for me as a practitioner, I always want to rule out biomedical. because they're physically uncomfortable. They're going to seek out, again, comfort. And who brings comfort to the kiddos? Who do the kids want when they're sick? Usually it's mom, right? So there are definitely a lot of strategies. I think without knowing specifics of what's going on in your home, it's difficult for me to kind of guide and pinpoint and draft a plan. But absolutely, if you really don't want them in your bed, there are ways to move forward with that, and you can be really successful. He can be really successful. Sorry, was it a he? Um, so yes, it's you're not stuck. Um, and then it comes down to, again, like, what are you comfortable with, right? So I am not a person that believes in cry it out method. And then by 4, cry it out is kind of past the gate because they can leave the room. But there are definitely strategies that you can do to help encourage your child, support your child, and foster their confidence to be able to sleep in their bed throughout the whole night. Joanna, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry.
Okay.
Of the noise in the background. Okay, our child was born very premature at 24 weeks. We got the news on Monday that our little boy has bleeding, a grade 4 bleed in one half of his brain.
Oh.
That's the most severe bleeding you can have. What can we like? What can you help that parent manage expectations as to what that could affect and what to
Yes.
in terms of their brain?
So, okay, so this is more complicated, right? There, again, it depends on the report, what area of the brain it's happening in. And then from there, it will manifest in various forms. So if the bleed, for example, is hitting like the language center of the brain, then you're going to see delays in language. You're going to see that struggle there. If it's happening in a different area of the brain, it's going to affect the areas that it's targeting, which makes sense. So I think by understanding more about where it is, what's going on, then you can draft a plan to go forward with strengthening certain skills so that it's a multi-pronged approach, right? So when I work with kids that are neurodivergent, have health issues, it's always a multi-pronged approach. One of my industry pet peeves, specifically in Singapore, is when someone claims to have all the answers and it's outside their scope, right? My scope is behavior, my scope is parenting, and I can absolutely help with different things and setting expectations and creating routines and activities that can help the child's brain. But I am not a neurologist, right? I have a passion for neuroscience, but I will never claim to be a neurologist. And so for this child, I would strongly recommend a multifaceted approach and learning more where, again, what areas of the brain specifically are being targeted by this bleed, and then working alongside a neurologist, potentially an occupational therapist or a speech path, again, depending on how the bleed is affecting the brain, potentially a pediatrician, but it's absolutely, a circle, a house that you need to help with the kiddo properly and ethically, and to make sure that the parents' expectations are in line, and also making sure that, you know, the parents are that you're getting support too, because you're going through a lot. It's your kid. It's terrifying. Um, it's not easy at all. And it's an understatement. And making sure that while you're focusing on obviously the health and the welfare of your child, that you're also getting support for yourself. Because if you're not getting support, you're not going to be able to support your child the way that they need to be. So
Absolutely, really, really tough situation. I'm sorry you're going through this. Sometimes it's even hard to find the right questions to ask and knowing who to
yes,
trust, especially when you're in a country where you're not that familiar with the medical system potentially and where to go. But I'm sure you'll figure it out, and we're there for you if you need us, for sure. Sending you lots of love. Another question is, thank you for the session to start with. Very useful. I try to validate and acknowledge my child's emotions whenever he's having a tantrum. But when I tell him how it's hard or how I know he's having a hard time, he'd say, no, it's not hard. After he's done with his tantrum, I'd bring it up and say, you sounded very angry. or sad or blue, what happened, he would reply by saying he was very green and yellow. Interesting, i.e. happy and calm. He wasn't angry at all. How do you deal with the denial and and not acknowledging what's going on?
Okay, so this is something that this is my youngest is like this too. Um, and what happens is they get this kind of glare, right? And where they know that they've messed up. They know that they're out of line, that they're out of control, and they hate it. They hate it. So when you bring attention to it, it actually backfires. So my eldest, I can sit with her and just be like, oh, this is so heavy and this is awful. Um, and you feel this way when we talk about it. My youngest, no, absolutely not. Um, and so it is challenging. So one of the things, again, two things I would be looking at is one, connection on a very core level, which again, I coach parents on all the time. It's a very specific way of bonding with your kid. And it kind of goes back to how we used to bond with them as babies. But as they get older, we kind of tend to forget. And we do this with the developmental milestones too, right? We just think like, oh, they're old enough. I have so many parents come to me with 8-year-olds, specifically between 8 and 10. Oh, my kid should be able to, they can do all of this on their own because they seem very independent. Um, but back to your son, this is very normal. And what I would watch for yourself is a lot of times, and in many, 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 too many parenting strategies out there, they teach you to active listen. Kids that experience glare hate active listening. Active listening is when you say, okay, Johanna, I can see you're really angry. And you're thinking, as someone that experiences glare and an adult, yeah, again, no shit, I'm angry. I don't need you to tell me I'm angry, right? So, and that's what's happening with your son. Like, yeah, I know, mom, I get it. I know I'm upset. But the not wanting to admit to it, one, that tells me there's a connection break for whatever reason. And this is not about blame. This is not saying you did anything wrong. It's saying that your son doesn't feel safe to admit that he's made a mistake. And again, my youngest is like this, and it's not necessarily through any fault of yours or mine. It's that they're kind of programmed this way. Um, so strengthening that connection is huge, huge. And then really focusing on mirroring. Mirroring is very different than for not, oh my gosh, I'm saying active listening. Sorry, again, I've got now they're getting along. Okay. Um, so it's very different than active listening. In mirroring, it's okay. I give this example in my live workshops because it's easier to do and act out on stage. But so the best way to explain it is to show it. So it was a long day, super hot day. I took the kids out to this light festival, and they're fighting again. Sorry, light festival in Singapore. Now we all know it's super hot here, right? Oh my God, so hot. It was late. They took a nap. It's like, all right, take a nap because we're going to be late. Da, da, da. By the end of it, we're all sweaty. We're all hot. It's way past their bedtime. It is, they're hungry. They're thirsty. Like it's just a mess. And it was a Halloween thing because they'd gotten candy from each little vendor. And my daughter, my youngest, says, "Mommy, can I have a lollipop?" Now, there's only one lollipop. Okay, this is all very relevant. One lollipop. And she takes it. I'm like, "Yeah, sure, it's fine." Waiting for the car. Unwraps it, drops on the ground. We all know what's coming, right? Drops on the ground and falls. And if I would have done active listening, it would have gone something like this. "Oh, it's okay. We'll get one when we get home. It's fine. You're fine. You're fine. It's okay. I know you're sad, but it's okay. It's all right." Right? Instead, what I did was mirror. And in that moment, you basically, sorry, I've got a dog behind me. I'm a mess today. This is the worst day. Worst time to record. In that moment, it dropped on the ground. She starts to cry, and I look at her and oh, I said, "Oh my gosh, that's so awful." And I start to like melt down a little bit. And she looks at me and she's like, "What's awful?" I said, "You're so tired and hungry and you just wanted a lollipop." And fell on the ground. It's like the worst thing that could happen. And in that moment, I'm showing her that I feel her pain, right? Do I think her reaction is a bit over the top? Yeah, probably. But that's not the time for this conversation. I'm really just modeling back her state at that point in time. So when your son is really upset and really angry, you can try modeling, you can try just sitting with him in the anger, and you don't have to talk. I think that's where we kind of get ourselves in trouble as grown-ups. We're so used to, and especially as women, we're so used to talking about everything and talking through things. Um, that in those moments you don't have to talk. You can just be like, oh, that's it. That's it. To show, okay, I get it. Like he doesn't need you to tell him he's mad or that you see that he's mad. He knows. Sounds like from what that brief thing that you shared. It sounds like he knows he's mad. But she's gonna be like, oh, and it can even be like, do you need a minute? I'm gonna give you a minute. I'm gonna walk away. I'm gonna come back and check on you. And it's just like a peek. It's just a check-in. Like, I'm here if you want to talk about it. Not every child and not every situation needs to be deconstructed. Some do. My eldest, absolutely. We'll go back through and work through stuff. And sometimes in some situations, my youngest does too. We have to go back and revisit because her brain kind of rewires things incorrectly. Um, but even then, she doesn't like it. And I have to do it in small snippets. So if he's like, oh, I was calm. She's like, oh, interesting. You were calm. Huh. Okay. I wonder how come the, toy was thrown across the room when you were calm. That's really interesting. Try being curious instead of telling him what he already knows. I don't know if that helps, but yes, it sounds like glare. It sounds like he knows. He doesn't need you to tell him. He knows. And you
Yeah.
want him to be honest, but it also sounds like there's shame involved in not
Mhm.
being perfect. And that comes a lot with, there's a lot of kids that go through this, especially, the smarter they are, the brighter
Yeah.
they are, the more shame comes up. A lot of kids with ADD have a huge amount of shame, gifted kids, tons of it, because again, they know better and
Yeah.
they know better, right? So
Yeah, it's tough. Okay, to finish, I would love for you to tell us a little bit how you work with parents. So you're seeing
yeah.
private consultations. Where is your clinic?
So I don't have a clinic. I work, I have one of two options. I either work remotely like this and I break it down with the parents. We go through, generally what I do is get an overall sense of what's going on. What is your major concerns? We start with the big ones, right? If there's aggression in the home, if there's stress in the home, there's medical issues in the home. We start there. And then we start going and breaking things down bit by bit. So the whole way that I work, everything I do is backed by science with neuroscience, behavioral science, um, and it's practical. And I think that's what's different from what I do versus a lot of other techniques that are out there. There's a lot of books and things that are spieling ideas and stuff without kind of digging below and finding out what's going
Yeah.
on, right? So I do a lot of remote sessions simply because for full-time working parents, it's a lot easier to check in with me and have a quick chat during your lunch break, than it is to try to find a slot to come and physically see me. Um, I also come and visit the home, depending on the situation, and also the comfortability. I've met parents out at a cafe because that's where they felt most comfortable. It's fine. It's really what's up to the client. But generally, I always start with the parents. My focus is on the parents because at the end of the day, you're the ones that live in your home, and you're the ones that live this life, and you're the ones dealing with the behaviors all the time. And if any of your kids are like my youngest one, they present beautifully for everyone else, right? But then when they get home, it's like a war zone. So my focus and goal is to teach parents everything they need to know about brain development, about why behaviors happen, which is a whole nother conversation, and how to connect on this basic but deep, deep, deep level to build that bond and security. And my goal with every single client I've ever taken on is to work myself out of a job. I don't want you to need me forever, because if you need me forever, I haven't done my job right.
Absolutely.
That's the point. So that's how I work with people. I've worked with clients twice, like I've seen some clients once or twice a week. Sorry, once a week for like 2 times, and they've got it and it's hooked and it's fine. I've had clients that have more severe issues, autism, or some that are kids that are gifted that struggle with a lot of understanding what's going on socially, where it's longer, right? Because needs dictate that. But yeah, it's very as needed. It's very individualized, even though the guiding principles are there, and again, grounded in actual science and research and studies that have been around for decades. Each family is unique, and so I make sure to address things in a way that works with each family.
That's amazing. That's great to know. Okay, well, we've come to the end of our coffee morning. Thank you so much, Danie, for
You're welcome.
your morning with us.
I'm
And
so sorry my brain was so scattered. Of course, when you're
okay,
recording, my brain's just like a
I know what
mess.
it feels like. And to be honest, this noise is a bit the same.
Yeah,
I'm
it's now I've got
great.
knocking. So anyway,
I'm glad your voice made it all the way through. And
thank you. Me too.
well, and I hope the kids are still alive.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you, parents, also for joining us this morning. We have an in-person coffee morning next week on baby milestones. So if anybody is
Oh,
interested,
nice.
let me know. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll see
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.